In section 5.4, we're learning about the midsegment theorem. Now, a midsegment, by definition, is a segment in a triangle that connects the midpoints of two of those sides. So in this case, if M and N are my midpoints, so AM and MB would be the same, AN and CN would be the same, and I connect them, then MN is what we're calling the midsegment. There are two properties to the midsegment. The segment joining the midpoints of the two sides is always parallel to that third side, and it's always 1/2 as long as that third side. So if you look at example number 1, I'm given information that QR is equal to 8. Now QR would be considered the third side to YX, because in my given information it says X, Y, and Z are midpoints. So if Y and X are connected, this would be my midsegment. So this midsegment has two properties. It is parallel to this third side of QR, and it's 1/2 as long. So if QR is 8, YX has to be 4. Likewise, just from the midpoint definition, ZR and QR have to be 4. So I could say QZ is 4. Now I'm going to change colors so we can look at a different midsegment. ZX, I'm told, is equal to 5. But again, Z and X is connecting a midpoint to a midpoint, so it should be parallel and 1/2 as long as the third side, which would be QS. So if ZX is supposed to be 1/2 the third side, then QS must be 10, or double that midsegment. So QS would be equal to 10. And QS is going to be parallel to that midsegment of ZX, while XY, that midsegment, is parallel to QR. Another way we could use the midsegment theorem. If J, K, and L are all midpoints, then I know that JK, LK, and JL are all midsegments. So let me use different colors here to make this easier to see. If JK is a midsegment, then it should be parallel to AC, the third side, and 1/2 as long. So AC is 14 because JK is 7. If LK is a midsegment, then it should be parallel to AB and 1/2 as long, which means AB is 16 because LK is 8. And if JL is yet another midsegment because it's connecting two midpoints, it should be parallel to BC, which means BC is 18. So the perimeter of the big triangle ABC would be 14 plus 16 plus 18, which is a perimeter of 48. And that's another example of how we can use the midsegment theorem to find out information about a diagram. The second theorem that I want you to be familiar with is the one that talks about the midpoint of the hypotenuse of a right triangle. Now remember, in a right triangle, the hypotenuse is always the side across from the right angle. So if the midpoint of a hypotenuse of a right triangle, we should have that equidistant from the three vertices. In other words, this midpoint of the hypotenuse is going to be the circumcenter of that triangle. So in example number 1, it doesn't say anything about hypotenuse or midpoint. It simply says that AD is a median. So you have to know your definitions. I see right here that this is a right angle, so that means this is a right triangle. A median goes from the vertex to the midpoint of the opposite side. Well, since I'm going from the right angle to the midpoint of the opposite side, I'm going to the midpoint of the hypotenuse. So midpoint means that BD and DC are the same, but since it's the midpoint of the hypotenuse, it's equidistant from the three vertices of B, C, and A. So these three sides are the same. So using that theorem about the midpoint of the hypotenuse, I was able to mark the triangle this way. What I now notice to help me find the angles is that I have two isosceles triangles, so I can draw a cross from the two congruent sides, and those two angles should match. So angle 1 has to be 40 to match the other 40. If angle 2 and angle 1 added together to make that 90-degree angle, but now I know that angle 1 is 40, that means that angle 2 has to be the remaining 50 to complete that 90-degree angle. And again, I'm going to use the isosceles triangle theorem. If I draw a cross to angle B and a cross to angle 2, those two angles are the same. And we just figured out that angle 2 is 50, so is angle B. And in a triangle, you only get 180 degree angles, so that 50 for 50 for angle 2 and 50 for angle B plus angle 3 have to equal that total of 180. So that means 100 plus angle 3 needs to make 180. So angle 3 has to be the remaining 80 degrees inside that triangle.